homework that goes along with this is listed here. It's in the homework packet. This is a little bit of a review that we're doing along with our first unit on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. Let's review. When you are adding and subtracting decimals, the most important thing to remember is that you always need to line the decimal point up. So if I'm going to add 4 and 8 tenths and 12 and 789 thousandths, when I do this, I want to line the decimal point up. And if you want to add some zeros to hold places, you can. You bring your decimal point straight down in your answer and you add just like you would any other number. 17 and 289 thousandths. Now, when you have a number that does not have a decimal point in it, obviously, the decimal point is directly behind it. So this would be 9 minus 4 and 84 hundredths. Now, when you are subtracting, you need to put these zeros to hold place because you need to borrow. So I can't do 0 minus 4. I can't borrow from the 0, so I'm going to borrow from the 9. It becomes an 8. That makes that a 10. Borrow from the 10. It becomes a 9. That makes that a 10. Now I can subtract. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 8 is 1. Bring your decimal point straight down. 8 minus 4 is 4. So 4 and 1600. Now, multiplying decimals. Now, when you are multiplying decimals, I highly recommend ignoring the decimal point until the end. You do not need to stack these on top of each other. So, look at these two numbers like they don't have a decimal point. So, if this didn't have a decimal point, it would be 24. If this didn't have a decimal point, it would be 3. So, multiply 24 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12, carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 72. So, you would get 72. But, how many places do we have after the decimal points in the things that we're multiplying together? We've got 1, 2. So I need 2 in my answer. So I start at the back, 1, 2, 7,200. 2 decimal places, 2 decimal places. Same thing here. Forget about the decimal. Multiply 4 times 12. 4 times 12 is 48. Let's count decimal places after the decimal point. I've got 1, 2, 3, none here. So I need 3 in my answer. So 1, 2, I need to put a 0. There's my 3 decimal places. So 48,000. Let's do this multiply. Again, forget about the decimal point. So this would be 204 times 6. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2. 6 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 6 times 2 is 12. Count the decimal places in the things we're multiplying together. So I've got 1, 2. So I start at the back. 1, 2, decimal point goes right there. Last one. Forget about the decimal. 2 times 12 is 24. How many decimal places? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I start here. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our answer. That's just a quick review of decimals. Now, we are talking about adding integers on the number line. When you are doing integer problems on the number line, you always start at 0. So I'm going to add 2 plus 3. The thing that you need to know, positive numbers go to the right, negative numbers go to the left. You start at 0. So start at 0. Here I am. 2. I would move to the right 2. So I'm right here now, plus 3. So I stay where I am, and I go 3 to the right. 1, 2, 3. I end up at 5. Now, another way to show that same exact problem, I'm going to erase this, because you're going to see this written both ways. Sometimes people don't do anything for the first number, 2. So I start at 2. So instead of starting at 0, I start right at 2. And then I add 3, so I'll move to the right 3 places. That's another way to show it. Personally, I think it is way more readable if you start at 0, show 2, and then from 2, go 3 to the right. So let's ended up? We ended up at 5. Negative 4 plus 7. So start at 0. Negative 4 means we're going to go to the left 4. So right here I am at negative 4. You could also just start at negative 4 and not have this first line. Plus 7. So right here I am at negative 4. I'm going to add 7. I'm going to the right because it's a positive number, so I count. 4, 5, 6, 7. Where do I end up? 3. So negative 4 plus 7 is positive 3. Let's do this one. Negative 5 plus 6. So I start at 0, go to the left for negative 5. Plus 6. So I stay where I am and go to the right 6. So where do I end up? 1. It's actually not too much of a difficult concept. Let's look at number 5. Start at 0, negative 1. So I'm going to the left 1 plus negative 4. So I start at negative 1 and I go left 4 spots. I end up at negative 5. All right. Now, with the rules, positive 2 and negative 2 are called opposite or additive inverses. What happens when you add them together? So, if I start at 2, and then I add negative 2, you always end up at 0. What happens? A number and its opposite, or additive inverse, will always give you 0. So, negative 6 plus 6 gives you 0. These are opposites or additive inverses. 8 plus negative 8 always gives you 0. So when you add a number to its opposite, or additive inverse, you will always end up at 0. All right. Real-world examples. A fisherman drops his net to a depth of negative 8 feet below the surface of water. How far does he need to raise the net to bring it back to the surface? Well, if he drops it negative 8, to bring it up to the surface, which would be 0, I'm going to add 8. All right. A bird is 7 feet above the ground. What integer would you use to represent the distance that the bird needs to fly to get back to the ground? So it's 7 above. It's going to be negative 7. Want to bring it right back down. All right, here's our rules. When the signs are the same, you add the number and keep the sign. Add the numbers, keep the sign. When the signs are different, you subtract the smaller number from the bigger number, keep the sign of the bigger. Think of it as a battle. Who will win? A positive or a negative, and how many will they win by? So if they are the same, add the number, keep the sign. If they are different, you subtract and take the sign to the larger. So let's look at this. Negative 7 plus negative 3, they are the same. So I add 7 and 3 is 10, and I keep the sign, negative 10. Let's look at 2. 8 plus negative 4, they are different. So I subtract. What's 8 minus 4? It is 4. Which one is bigger? Positive 8. So our answer is positive 4. 8 plus negative 2. They are different. So subtract. 8 minus 2 is 6. It's going to be positive 6 because 8 is bigger. Negative 8, negative 9 plus negative 10. They are the same. So I add, which is 19. Keep the sign. Negative 19. Negative 4 plus negative 5 is negative 9. Add and keep the sign. Negative 4 plus 16. Add and keep, or they're different, so I subtract. 16 minus 4 is 12, and the 16 is bigger, so positive 12. I want to take a look at one more example. Let's take a look at this one. 6 plus negative 9. They are different, so I subtract. 9 minus 6 is 3, and which one is bigger? The negative, so negative 3. If they are different, subtract and take the sign to the larger.